Lord, may the words on my lips, the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable unto you this day, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Some of you will remember my young friend Leo, who came to church on a few occasions. Leo was from France. He was here for 6 months, staying with us as he finished the second term of a 3-year business program here in Canada. He fit in very well into our family, fit in particularly well, becoming somewhat like a son to me. Although Leo was about a third of my age, we spent a lot of time together playing pool. We spent a lot of time together on the ski slopes and the golf course, and especially on the squash courts. He was an amazing squash player, and we had lots and lots of games playing squash. He also even tried to teach me the ukulele, which I'm still playing with a little bit. Leo was curious about my relationship with Jesus. It was all new to him. And in particular, discussions that we had around faith. He was a keen student, a lover of sports. He was a real kindred spirit. And so it was with a lot of sadness that we said goodbye to him at the airport. We hugged and kind of fought back tears. Realistically, coming from France, we knew that this was probably the last time that we would see each other. And so with a final wave, as he went into the privacy of the security area, I wondered if he was out of my life and out of my life forever. I returned again with a little bit of a heavy heart to the church here and began the work that I had to do for Sunday morning, a little bit of a lump in my throat, trying to focus on my work. And the telephone rang, and it was a sad and depressed and frustrated Leo. Flight's been canceled because of fog. I'm going to miss my connecting flight in Vancouver to France. I'm being held over for a day. Can I come and stay with you for another day?
Oh, cool.
Well, it kind of took me by surprise, because when I got to the airport and saw him there after that very emotional goodbye, that very kind of in my heart final time that I would perhaps ever see him again, it was strange. Seeing him there was almost like seeing a ghost. Bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not. And it was great to have him with us for another day and a half before he went off to France. But you know, through that whole experience, I had maybe a little tiny taste of what it might have been like for the disciples and for Mary. Surely they believed that they had seen him for the last time when they saw him on the cross, that day of his departure from the world. Jesus' death had a finality about it that was far exceeding the airport farewell that I had with my young friend. Emotions many, many times greater, I'm sure. And it was a shock to them. They said it was like seeing a ghost. They resolved in their minds, too, that he was gone and gone forever, that it was time to forget about him, time to get on with life, time to begin a new future. So we can imagine on that resurrection day of their astonishment, of their unbridled joy, that first Easter weekend. Jesus tells us the story. John tells us the story. Early on the first day, while it was still dark, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, Lord, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know what they have done with him. Early on that first day, while it was still dark. Do you agree that before the resurrection, that the world was a dark, dark place? There's that darkness that speaks of Mary's eagerness to see Jesus. Even though it was dark, she was fumbling her way off to see him, off to the tomb, to provide that last act of kindness to her master. She had waited all through the Sabbath day, and then in those dark hours before the dawn of sun on Sunday morning, so like I said, stumbling to the place where Jesus had been laid, in this kind of desperate journey, she was there. Jesus had been taken in the darkness on Thursday, had been flogged, had been beaten, had had that mock trial, had been hung on the cross in a hurry before the Sabbath day began at 6 o'clock that night. Mary didn't have a chance to say goodbye, and her heart must have been very heavy. She must have been filled with a grief that was far beyond that grief that I experienced. So that day she arrived. She sees the stone removed from the entrance. She must have been in shock. She must have had great confusion. And it's interesting, her first response is, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. In other words, she felt that the body was probably stolen. Even though Jesus had talked about his resurrection, they didn't understand. She thought that somebody had stolen him from the tomb. So she goes running back to Peter and to John, and she's in panic. And you hear the panic in her voice. They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We do not know where they have laid him. Peter and John, also mystified, run to the tomb. John arrives there first, but he didn't go inside. Peter, the impetuous one, goes inside, and what does he see? He sees the cloth and the linen clothes, as if Jesus had just evaporated, and the clothes were all neatly laid out where Jesus had been laid, still in place. And then the next verse, we say that they saw and they believed, but they didn't understand. In other words, they were still in the darkness that first Easter. The disciples and Mary still in darkness over what had happened to Jesus. Their hearts broken. It's a dark world without Easter. It's a dark world indeed. Some of you who are my age and older will remember George Burns and Gracie Allen. Gracie a little bit before my time. She passed away in 1962. She was deeply in love with George and George with her, and you know that comedian couple as people who transcended vaudeville into film, into radio, and finally into television. Probably one of the best known couples in order to make those transitions. And when she died, and for a period after she left George with these words saying, never place a period where God has placed a comma. Never place a period where God has placed a comma. Such a saying doesn't make any sense without Easter. Without Easter, there is no concrete evidence of life beyond the grave. That's the only concrete evidence we have of life beyond the grave. Without Easter, there is only blind speculation. Pardon me, it was 10 years ago, excuse me a second, it was 10 years ago that Janice and I, at Easter time, received a phone call that no parent wants to receive. An urgent call from the hospital in on the Gold Coast in Australia, where my son Josh, 18 years old at the time, had been surfing with 3 of his friends. Janice tells me that the conversation that she had with the nurse there, or the doctor there, I guess it was, went something like this: I'm calling from the Gold Coast Hospital. Your son has had a very serious surfing accident, and we're now preparing him for immediate surgery. Don't know what internal damage has been done. We're going to do surgery to check his internal organs. We have suggested to you that this is a serious operation, and you should come and see him and be with him as soon as you can. Well, Janice left that next day. That was Good Friday. My flight was immediately after our Easter worship here. It was a dark time for us. Our hearts were heavy. Yet they were grateful for the care that we recognized that Josh was receiving in Australia on the other side of the world. And we recognized God's abiding grace in all of this as well. Well, the trip to Australia was a dark trip for me. It was interesting. I was among others who seemed to be excited, making their way to Australia with the anticipation of good things ahead. For me, it was a time of foreboding darkness, and fear was the principal emotion that I had. When I arrived at the hospital at the Gold Coast, it was a beautiful sunny morning. I found out very quickly that the surgery had been very successful. It had gone better than anybody had anticipated. The damage to Josh had been minimal. He'd got a surfboard in the stomach as a wave was pushing against him, and it went into, as he was making his way onto the shore, into the sand, the blunt end coming into his stomach. and doing untold damage until they found out what internal damage had been done. As it turned out, he had lost a third of his pancreas, which for a young, healthy person was not major. And the sun began to shine particularly warmly that day. The world became a brighter place. The landscape seemed a little bit brighter. A week after that, Josh was well enough to travel with us, and the consequences of his injury have been really minimal. He's a strong young man today with no consequences as a result of that. But I can't get through an Easter without thinking about Josh and how that all unfolded. When death threatens somebody precious to you, Easter takes on a new meaning. Easter becomes everything. It becomes a rock in times of trouble. It becomes an anchor. It becomes a hope when there seems to be little hope. It's a dark world without Easter. With Easter, the sun breaks through and hope breaks forth. It shines everywhere. The evidence for Jesus' resurrection is so strong, somebody once said, that no one would question it except for two things. First, it's a very unusual event. And secondly, if you really believed it happened, then you would have to change the way that you live. The testimony, eyewitness accounts to Christ's resurrection is so compelling that the only reason that a person might deny it is because of the way that it would cause you if you believed it to change your life. Saw a church sign that said, to our Christian friends, Happy Easter. To our Jewish friends, Happy Passover. To our atheist friends, good luck. I trust that we will leave this service with hallelujah on our hearts and on our lips. Jesus is alive. And because he lives, we can live too. Easter is God's shining brightly into a dark